Is it possible that governments could be a new buyer of silver?
The land of Arcadia.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And tonight we have a video about some interesting things going on in the gold and silver markets. And a feature is whether governments would consider using silver as money again. We'll leave gold aside for tonight. But fortunately, my friend Jeff Clark, senior analyst at goldsilver.com, wrote another great article today, as he usually what happens when he writes articles. I'm a big fan, some great research. He asked the question here, is it possible that governments could be a new buyer of silver? The potential looming catalyst for silver no one sees coming. And as you see, enter a new buyer governments. The possibility I'm raising is that they begin to do some or all of those things. Would they add silver to the reserves or begin to stockpile it again? There are many reasons. Here's 5 of them. And I thought this one would be a fun one to dig through. Governments using silver as a monetary asset is not new. Obviously, if you look back to those coins from dimes and quarters 1964 and before, 71.5% silver. So really don't even have to go that far. Interesting to see we abandoned the silver standard before Nixon finally took us off the gold standard, which I guess 7 years later. And we've seen the price of both metals soar since then. So India was a silver country long before it was a gold country. For those of you who've heard of the Opium Wars between Great Britain and China, I mean, silver does have a long history as money. Here, Jeff says, other potential ties to government and silver, Mexico being the largest silver producing country in the world. I thought this was interesting. China and Russia are third and fourth largest producers. And Jeff writes, in today's world, would it really be surprising to see some countries want to stockpile silver again? Wouldn't be exactly a stretch to see China or Russia do that. And I think that's a great point he raises there. I haven't seen any evidence yet of a central bank buying silver. There was speculation last year that we saw those massive chunks of silver being added allegedly into SLV. Whether that was China or not, I wish I could tell you. Certainly seems plausible enough. And when you see such a large amount added in such a short period of time, if I were China or Russia and I was in their position, seeing the way that relations are, and I mean, you see Putin talk pretty publicly about the nefarious purposes that the dollar is used for, and his desire to pull away from the dollar. I mean, gee, if you and I can figure out that silver is pretty out of line, I'm sure that someone over there can. And would that fit the plan of one of those central banks saying, all right, let's load up on silver, not tell anyone about it? I don't have evidence to say they're doing that, but it's certain. I've almost wondered when one of these central banks would, because despite party or country lines, it seems what banks and governments like doing more than anything is making money. And I mean, again, I know maybe I'm a little biased here, but again, I didn't just start writing and saying all this stuff just so, it wasn't like I was sitting around one day and thought, well, if I dedicate the rest of my life to extolling the virtues of silver, I mean, all this came about for all the reasons that we talk about on the show, have guests from around the world comment on one after another. And while a lot of them agree that there's manipulation in the market and that this is a long-term trade by all means, hopefully the long-term about to begin, but I don't really think there's been much debate. And I've almost been surprised as talk to more people and see more expert investors and fund managers, and generally all come to the same conclusion, one of which we'll hit on later in this video. So I don't know that any central banks are publicly doing that yet, or that they would tell us if they were, but You would almost think that would be more likely than not. Perhaps do it in silent, and maybe one day we'll find out. Um, Here, number two, he mentions a monetary crisis demands it. I think that's another great point because a lot of the time people talk about, well, the central planners aren't going to allow this or that. I do still believe there's some point where things do get out of their control. I don't know, maybe people have been hearing that for hundreds or even thousands of years. And it's a fair point. You always wonder how long these things can go on. Um, but especially now we're hearing concerns about Corona again and just everything else that's going on in the world. Although most of which, just as Jeremy Powell again this week said, no interest rate hikes ever. I disagree with 2022. I don't think we'll ever see it. So anyway, I think there's what they plan and then what the market eventually does, and everything is set up for at some point the rest of the world to say we don't want your paper dollar, and at that point, well, we'll see what happens to gold and silver. It's already money. Silver is cheap. Certainly agree with those. Number five, I love. Nothing is impossible today, and certainly would we have expected negative interest rates, negative oil prices, that the Fed would be given a blank check. I mean, it's ironic because their blank check somewhat verifies all the Austrian economists and gold and silver bugs who said that what they were doing following the subprime crisis would never work. And despite Jerome Powell saying that everything was fine prior to Corona, I would say that the repo lines and interest rate cuts he was doing earlier before the Corona crisis was even on our radar are further verification that the previous policy didn't work. Yet, as is unfortunately often the case in monetary history, the solution is to just do more of what caused the problem, but at a faster clip. So, going a little farther down, if governments begin to buy silver in any meaningful amounts, they would become a major source of demand, just as with gold. There's a great chart Jeff has here. Government silver inventories. You see back in the 70s, 350 million ounces, and has just stayed, according to CPM Group, right at under 50 million. So dwindled a lot of the government stockpile. Governments wanted to match prior levels. I mean, you can see we're nowhere near the 1970, 1980, 1975 levels. So it's an interesting article. Now, would governments really buy silver? Um, Governments do begin to buy silver again, it won't just push the price higher, but would elevate silver's importance around the world. Would be a great marketing campaign. Um, I'm of the school of thought, as much as I love silver, I think my credentials there, if nothing else, are solid. I don't know that I expect we'll be using silver as money. I think somewhere at some point before the dollar or during the dollar's demise, that anything that's not nailed down, that people will be trading in dollars to get any sort of asset value, in particular the precious metals. And then when you think about all of the green technologies and growing uses of silver, I get the feeling silver will just be more in demand than would be worth it to use as currency. But again, would governments buy currency? I think they would be darn well served to do so. I mean, all the other things they waste money on. Actually, maybe I shouldn't say this. We don't government don't buy silver. Just keep keep letting it get into the hands of people, because here we have the In Gold We Trust report that was by Incrementum and Mr. Ronnie Stoiferle, who has been on the show several times. I haven't met Mark Valek, but helped Ronnie with the report here. Just came out about a week or two ago. And Ronnie will be joining us on the show to dig into the report in the next couple of weeks. Although I thought it was interesting. Of course, fortunately there's a chapter on silver. It was maybe 20 pages long, and I went through it, and you'll love it. I mean, if you get the report and you're wondering, Yeah, all right, so they can smash the price here and there, but I mean, if you want some great reasons why to hang in there, plus I just had to read to you the conclusion. So this is after about 20 pages, and he says, "We do not know what the future holds, but we would be surprised if, in retrospect, silver will not have proven to be a wise investment for the next generation." And it's interesting here. Maybe I'll start a little earlier. What might a future silver price look like? Current gold price is about 1700 with silver at 17. If we apply the 2011 ratio at 30, silver would be worth 56 today. 1980 ratio 20 would send silver to $85. I think there are a few people watching who would be happy with that. How long will it take? We do not know. The post World War II journey lasted 23 years. The post Cold War trip took 2 decades. The post Bretton Woods jaunt's a short 7 years. We're 9 years in now. So, on one hand, you could say, I guess it's better to come into the silver investing space today than in 2011. I don't think it will be 2 decades. What we didn't have then was a Federal Reserve that's completely gone wild and now says no interest rate cuts 2 years in advance, and they're not going to raise interest rates in 2 years either. And a much more fragile situation. And I try and do a good job of that, of not getting overly excited about the timing. I think there are a lot of things happening now that indicate it could be a lot sooner than later. And I mean, the way I've looked at it is that it's overdue. When does a scheme similar to Bernie Madoff's unravel? Sometimes timing just takes what it does. So we'll see what the future holds, but certainly a lot to look forward to, in my opinion. Especially here, this one was rather stunning. We'll be digging into this with Dave Kranzler on Sunday. But you see COMEX Depository Warehouse gold stocks, where to meet these recent deliveries, the COMEX gold stockpiled has spiked. This chart goes back to 2015. You can see nowhere in the last 5 years anywhere near these levels. So a lot of gold been coming from Switzerland, a lot of contracts up for delivery. We'll see how this all shakes out. But I thought that was just a really stunning chart that if you haven't seen, you'd want to take a look at. Here I have a note pulled up, BCR YouTube page, because if you remember when Andrew McGuire was talking about the wholesale silver shortage, and I bring that up because he sent me an email last week that I wanted to check with him whether this was okay to share. He said that it was. I thought it was pretty interesting. Following what he said on the show, Andrew McGuire mentioned that Swiss refiners are now putting silver orders on hold to meet very large gold demand. We were anticipating weeks, July, etc. Now our orders are pushed out for months. For size, there are no offers to sell. So we will see how that continues to go. A lot of commentary like that, and I'm not sure that we've reached the point where there's not a block of silver yet, but I continue to get emails from viewers about not being able to buy silver in the United Kingdom, in Australia. Perth Mint still pretty far behind schedule, and you can't go in there and buy retail silver right now. And especially if there is a second wave of corona, hopefully that's not the case, but um, just a fragile supply chain, and we'll keep an eye on it for you here on Arcadia Economics. Another great reason to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Quick look at the prices. Here's our Kitco chart. Ended at, let's call it 1750. Gold at 1730. So gold's still close to the highs of this cycle. Fortunately, next week on Monday, we will have Craig Hemke on the show and get his take. He's written some really interesting articles for Sprott Money, and we'll talk more about the deliveries, any thoughts he has on the upcoming silver deliveries. So a lot of good stuff coming. I hope you're out there having a great week. Andy Schechtman tomorrow night, Dave Kranzler on Sunday, some new interviews. So if you found this helpful, hit the share button so that more people can be aware of what's going on and at least find out before it happens. By all means, I don't ever want anyone to think that I'm saying that my opinion is the only one that's correct, but just trying to share information that they don't often mention, at least that I found on my career on Wall Street. So, hope you're having a great night, getting ready, set for a great weekend. And if you'd like some more coverage of the gold and silver markets, well, it's coming your way now.